So I'm very pleased to welcome Peter Bailin. He's an educator and conservationist who holds zoology degrees from both the University of California, Berkeley and UBC. There's a full bio on our website, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'll just hit a few of the highlights. Peter instructed biology at Vancouver Community College for 35 years, including a stint teaching science education at UBC. He retired in 2006, and he now serves as facilitator with the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation Education. He volunteers at the Vancouver Aquarium and just stepped down as chair of the Conservation Committee of BC Nature. Now, Peter is really into turtles. One cold day at Niskonlith Lake, that's near Kamloops, ice formed quickly, and through the ice, Peter saw turtles walking along the bottom. And this sparked an interest in studying the turtles, which he has done since 2003. So tonight he's going to examine the natural history of Western painted turtles, the only freshwater turtles in British Columbia. They're endangered on the coast and of special conservation interest in the interior. I'm looking forward to hearing about these enigmatic creatures, and I'm sure you are too, so I'll turn it over to Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you for honoring me with the invitation to address the Delta naturalists. So I'm going to press share. And hopefully I can find my and press play. Oh no, it happened again.
No, that looks good at this end, Peter.
Yeah, it's supposed to fill the screen, and it was last time I did it, but oh well. I guess we'll go with it this way. Press what I need to press. Okay, well, here we are. And okay, there we go. What you're seeing in front of you is where most of my study takes place on Western painted turtles. It's called Niskonlith Lake. It's about 50 kilometers east of Kamloops. And I'm lucky enough to have a cabin there. So wisdom, that's an Oxford definition. And it may sound like a strange thing to talk about animal wisdom, but I think I have a good argument for it. And so we're calling this talk The Wisdom of Turtles. And so I've modified the above definition that you see there with one that looks like it could easily apply to really any creature. The soundness of an action or decision with regard to the application of experience, knowledge, and good judgment that develops within a species over time. Because in fact, if any species, any living organism doesn't have a good script for what to do right in the world, it just simply will not exist. So you can read a little bit more about, if you haven't already, in my thoughts about wisdom by taking a look at the BC Nature magazine of this last one, the fall edition, and I have a article there. So I guess I'm admitting people too. Okay, there we go. So turtles appeared a long time ago, about the same time as dinosaurs, early dinosaurs appeared, and they're quite recognizable. And they, of course, having nice bones all over their body, leave pretty nice fossil records, and a good record of how they've changed over time. And for some reason, I'm not advancing. There we go. I see. Okay, the Western painted turtle that we're talking about is, as we mentioned, the only freshwater turtle in BC. And they appeared about 15 million years ago. And by contrast, we humans have only been around about 315,000 years. And that's kind of pushing it with the more recent fossil discoveries of animals that are quite like us and even our own species. So they've had a lot of time to learn compared to us. So it's kind of a long history to be able to get it right, which they must have done because they're here. So this Western painted turtle is one of 4 subspecies in North America. You will find them in Delta, though not that frequently. They are very common, which makes them nice for studying. And they live about, like most turtles, a long time. So the books say about 30 years, but I'm suspicious that some of them don't live a heck of a lot longer than that. They get to about 250 millimeters long, and that's their length when you measure their plastrons. Oops, I'm giving something away. And the male is smaller than the female. They eat almost anything you can imagine that they can find. They're quite opportunistic in their feeding. And just kind of. They are endangered on the coast where we are. There are not that many around. And in the interior, they're blue listed, which means they're of special concern. Are you picking up the egg beater in the background?
We can hear something. And also I noticed that Anita is not muted. So Anita, could you mute yourself?
It's not her. It's okay. It stopped. Okay. So they something kind of interesting in 2013, their genome was decoded. So people know what their genetic makeup is and what a lot of their genes do. So don't confuse these with other turtles you'll find around. They're the red-eared slider. And they, obviously why they're called that, they're your pet store turtles that people release, and they do just fine around here. So the chances are better that you'll see a red-eared slider around your neck of the woods than you are a painted turtle. They aren't nearly as colorful, and they have really quite different behavior, like this tucking into the shell, which is something that the Western painted turtles don't do very often. So, wisdom, how about the house? This part is called what? I can't hear you because you're all muted. I guess I'll have to give an answer. So if you said carapace, that's what that part's called. That's made from the ribs. And I was only kind of figured out how that happened just a few years ago, really. It's the ribs that form first in the embryo. And then in between the ribs, the bone fills in and makes the carapace that you see when you diagnostic a turtle. And the bottom part is called, you're right, it's called a plastron. And people are thinking now that the actual primitive turtles developed the plastron first to avoid sharks coming up underneath them and eating them. That's a hypothesis, of course. Now, turtles have no ears, but fairly recently, people have recorded the sound they make. So this is a sonogram, which is a picture of sounds. Maybe you're familiar with that with birds. And what this sounds like is shh. All together now. I can't hear you. You're muted. But anyway, I don't think the turtles can hear it. I've heard them do it, but it's a threatening sound, I think, in defense that they make. So that's kind of interesting. So I noticed I was in Kelowna quite a few years ago. And there was a big sign there about the turtles there to take care of them. Never mind that half the turtles in the picture were red-eared sliders, but they also said, "Be quiet, don't disturb them. You won't disturb them." And I talk to them, and when I'm out with them, and they don't seem to mind at all because they can't hear me. Widespread. So in the blue, you see the Western version of the painted turtle. I had to do a little coloring in here because they didn't quite get it right. They just had them in the Columbia Basin. But of course, they're all the way up to about Williams Lake. There's a population there. And then there's none for a while until you get a little further south here. But they're in this, what's called the intermontane population here, supposed to the coastal population that we have in our neighborhood. So they're the northernmost turtle in the Western Hemisphere. There's way more turtles when you go back east and south. Very widespread. So that. So it's the only one that's native, only freshwater turtle that's native. If you're wondering about terminology, in Europe, they call freshwater turtles terrapins. So you may be familiar with that term. So they live just about any place there's water, from pristine ponds to really septic cattle ponds. I made the mistake one day. See, this place here that I'm indicating is called Nan's Pond, and it's down on the Wolf Ranch, which is just a couple kilometers, no, less than that, down the hill from our cabin. And whoopsie, and I made the mistake of swimming through it with mask and snorkel, and I was hoping of seeing turtles and capturing them that way, but I couldn't see in front of my nose hardly because it was so mucky and awful. I won't do that again anyway. So they'll go from these septic cattle ponds to beautiful pristine habitats. So what survival skills are they wise about? Well, you would think all of them, but let's explore them a bit and see. So foraging. Like a lot of animals like them, the young will tend to be more carnivorous than the adults, who are more herbivorous. But these guys are pretty opportunistic. The one you see here has got a dead little kokanee in its mouth, and one swimmer that I knew at our cabin saw one with a leech in its mouth. But mostly they'll be eating vegetation probably. They're wise about reproducing. They're wise about what temperatures they should be at. And they're wise about what they do in the wintertime and migrating and sometimes egg laying. And we'll go further into that in a few minutes. So body temperature, it's kind of like everything. So what they do is something called behavioral regulation, which means they do things to get to the right temperature, since they are ectotherms, which means, unlike us endotherms, they don't control their body temperature internally. They have to go to the right place to heat themselves up to the temperature that works best for them. And they do that by basking. If you get sun or good heat that you can feel in your hand coming through the clouds, they're out. If it starts raining, they're back in the water. If a heavy wind comes up, they also go out. So whatever would reduce their temperature, they avoid. So they get onto these logs and do that. When it gets too hot, they do something called surface basking, where they float on the water and just use the water to cool them off and to get to the right temperature and still take advantage of the sun. So the literature says that they like to be 24 degrees. That's best. I have my doubts. I think they may be liking it warmer than that, but that's what it is. So you can, so why do you want to be warm? Well, oops, didn't want to tell you. Why do you want to be warm? Well, it's so that your biochemistry works well. So we have a nice constant warm temperature so that we can metabolize our food, get rid of our waste, have our muscles work properly. That's pretty much the same for them. So they function optimally at a preferred body temperature that enables to do all the right functions. So along with that function, they have an odd thing where their sex is temperature dependent. They don't have sex chromosomes. And what happens is when the eggs are in the nest, the temperature around them is what determines their gender. So if it's 28 degrees, you can go either way. If you're warmer than 28, where your egg is in the nest, you turn into a female. And if it's less than that, you become a male. The babies can spend, and usually do around here anyway, spend their first winter in the nest. And they have the capability of freezing in the nest. So they can save themselves. They don't freeze too hard. So they're wise about winter. The food isn't available. The lakes and ponds freeze over. So here's your first skill testing question. What do they do while they're under the water? You can at least say it to yourself. What do you think? Okay. Chances are you haven't heard that word. So you know what, you've heard hibernate, and but technically, you can only hibernate if you're an endotherm, because hibernation involves dropping your body temperature to something quite low to reduce your dependence on the energy that's no longer available in your environment during winter. Who hibernates? Well, small mammals up to about the size of a marmot. That's about as large as you can go. And yes, bears technically do not hibernate. They can't, they're too big. If they truly hibernate, they die getting their body temperatures back up to where it should be. So David, I think I learned that from your dad's book half a century ago. So it's like hibernation, but it's called brumation when it occurs in ectotherms, because they take the temperature of the water anyway, so they're just going down with the temperature to whatever it is under the ice, which is slightly above freezing. Do they circulate? Well, actually, that's how I got started looking at things, because basically my training is as a fish biologist. And I saw them under the clear ice in 2003, and there were 3 of them walking around. I don't know what they're doing. Maybe it's just that males chase females even when it's cold, but they're actually walking around the bottom. So what's going on? They should be kind of sleeping, and they weren't. So they kind of circulate too. They can survive, according to the literature, 170 days in anoxic water at 3 degrees. That means no oxygen. And they don't breathe air for months. They can get some oxygen through the blood vessels in their throat and maybe in their other end too. But they've got a neat trick for this, because they use their biochemistry with antifreeze proteins in their blood to keep from freezing. And they do something called anaerobic metabolism. So do you do anaerobic metabolism? Sometimes you do. If you've ever gotten out of breath by strenuously doing something like a sprint, which maybe you don't do so much anymore. I tried today, didn't get very far. But what happens is that you actually start getting your energy without oxygen. It's far less efficient. And so when you're through with your sprint and you're out of breath, you're just reclaiming a more efficient energetic pathway and making up the oxygen debt that you incurred by using anaerobic metabolism. And anaerobic metabolism generates lactic acid or lactate. So what they've got in their blood, these turtles, they've got phosphate buffers to keep their blood from getting too acidic, so they can survive this anoxic environment. And of course, they've got lots of phosphate because they got lots of bone in their carapace. And that's how I do it. You notice this one in the picture basking with the snow still on the ground. As soon as they can get out from under the ice, they're up there trying to get warm. And in this phase, usually in April or so. Oh, no. I was going to ask you which one's the male, which one's the female. Maybe you can guess. Well, what are the differences that you see? I'll point you to them. Who's got the long claws? It's the male. And down south, the vent in the female is closer to the end of the carapace, and the male is quite a ways away south. And it tends to be thicker. There are subtle differences, but those are the most obvious ones. So wise about mating? Well, I have to say, it's going to be the female that's wise about mating, because males are males. So these long claws that you see here have an interesting function. If I was there with you, I'd have you play this out with me. But what they do is the males get in front of a female. They chase them like crazy. I mean, I've had them in the nets, and as soon as I put them in the water, boom, the males are right after the females during the mating season. And what they do is they get in front of the female, and they'll use those claws to rake the face of the female like that. And if she likes them a lot, she'll do it back. So then they copulate in the usual way. And that's what they do. Recently, I sort of had a question about males being aggressive. A few years ago, I was paddling in my kayak in the marsh where there was a lot of turtles, and I heard what sounded like a washing machine going. And here were 2 males who had grips on one another's throats, and they were just turbulent going in the water. And I wasn't thinking quickly enough to make a movie of it because I never heard anybody seeing that. But so I asked a question of my data, and in the lake in general, in my study area, I get pretty much equal ratio with males to females. But then I asked the question of what happens in the southern part of the lake. So the south end of the lake is, I consider here, the main concentrations of turtles are over here, and over there. The few spotty occurrences in other areas around. And there's my cabin right there. So that's the south end of the lake. So I asked the question in the mating season, what's the ratio? And there's more males than females. And I asked it later on in the summer, and that reverses. So I'm wondering if males, congregate with the females and then spread out again. Jury's still out. I'll see what happens with more data. So another question for you. Why did the turtle cross the road? And the answer is? So there is a problem with roads and turtles. Well, here's where they go. They go to the warmest area they can. That's usually a southish, southwest area, which gets not shaded, gets nice and warm, and they dig their nests there. When the female's digging a nest, it's quite something. She goes into a different universe. They're usually very skittish, and are quick. They'll always see you before you see them. Their eyes are great. But when they're in this state, you can do whatever you want. They're just like in a trance. They dig the nest with their rear legs, and they need a spot. And if they hit a rock, they have to stop. If you see a turtle crossing a road, it's often a female going to a nesting area. And if you try to help the turtle, they'll likely drop a whole bunch of water on the ground because they carry water in their cloacas, and they use that to moisten the soil where they're at to help them dig their nests. So they lay about a dozen eggs. They can lay up to 20 apparently, and they lay them in the warmest areas. And they do it in late spring and early summer. And around here, they just do one clutch a year. So there's some of the places that they might nest. Now, here's an interesting question here. You've probably seen lots of video, if you haven't seen it in person, of sea turtles going by the hundreds onto beaches and depositing their eggs there. Huge clusters are really big, a lot of them. They have lots and lots of eggs. So that's the case where they're sort of trying to beat the odds by all coming in a short period of time and beating the odds, meaning swamping the predators basically with their eggs, because predators will try to dig up their nests. So groups can help with that, because if there's a big group of you, the chances of your eggs being predated upon lessen. Around here, sometimes they do that, and sometimes they're dispersed with these turtles. Sometimes they're near the water, but you can't get too close. Like this area is on the north shore of the lake, and they don't nest here at all because the water level is just too high. So that's a danger. But if you have a bank, like here at the campsite at Niskonlith Lake, that's a good spot. But you have to be careful because there's critters around that will get your nests. I think that's a mink footprint. We do have mink. So there's pros and cons. So if you're in a group, you can swamp your predators. If you disperse, the predator is less likely to find your nest. Now, these nests apparently are only vulnerable for about 2 days because the predators that are after them, skunks, raccoons, mink, coyotes, use their noses to find them, and the scent apparently just goes away. And where I am, the ground is pretty gravelly, so you really can't tell where the nests are at all if it's been successful. You can't track the turtles like you can on sand. So there's pros and cons. If you go far away from the water, that means you, the female, are more exposed to potential predation when you're out, and the babies getting back to the water are more exposed to predation, as if you're compared to being close to the shoreline. On the other hand, you may avoid a lot of other problems. In the park there, I've got signs up and people report the turtle sightings to me, but the park provides a really nice environment for turtle nesting because the ground's disturbed and it's often open. So it's an invitation for the turtles to come and nest, and people often discover them and are very good about protecting them. The campers are, a lot of them are regulars from the nearby town of Chase, and they like the turtles. And if you find turtle nests, there's nice prescriptions of how to build a box that protects them from predators. Like I said, it's really only an issue for a couple of days, but anyway, that takes care of. Notice the little escape hatch for the turtles when babies when they do escape the nest. So the eggs incubate for 70 to 80 days. The babies hatch in late August or early September, and they remain in the nest until May or June of the following year. I'm not totally convinced they all do that, because I found some awfully small turtles at the end of the season, which is later in September, October. And I wonder about them. It could be that their last year's young that just didn't grow well, but it could be new ones too. So they're quite tiny. They're only about 25 millimeters across their plastrons when they hatch. Cute, huh? Oops. So the next thing about these turtles is they have very distinctive patterns on their plastrons. The westerns are the prettiest of the group. They have the most intense coloration. And these animals here, this one, I first caught in 2005, 56 millimeters, which probably means it was in its first full year, having hatched not the last September, but the September before that. It probably also already had one season in the lake and then again to get to this size. And notice its growth. And I was lucky enough to catch this one. Some turtles repeat. They're easy to catch. Others, I'm sure there's a lot that I've never caught. So it's variable here. And you see that it's grown quite nicely. And lo and behold, this year, caught it again. And by now, she's a full-grown female. At some point in between, in the last 10 years, she got to basically her maximum size. What I found with many turtles is that, and some I've got them for a couple of decades, they're the same size. They reach a critical size, max size, and that's it. So, and that's they can get it bigger than that, and she might still grow a bit too. We'll see what the next couple of years bring if I get good old R11 again. How do I get my numbers? I notch the edges of their shells. They have scutes around the margins here, and so right means right, R means right, and 11 is the 11th marginal scute. They've got 12 of them. You can't notch the ones here because they're not free. They're connected to the bottom. So you've got from 8 to 12 and 1 through 3 basically on the sides. And that's how you can mark them. So you can see the growth of this animal in the green. That's the weight. You get what you expect with an animal growing, a nice curve like that. And if I had the scaling right and knew what to do with these, you'd find the same kind of thing happening with the plastron length. So the plastrons are an interesting challenge. Some years ago, I don't know how we got connected, but there's a group at the University of Victoria, it's actually an engineering computer science department, who were doing computer learning. So the question was, can the computer learn to recognize the plastron pattern of a turtle? So I said, this is great. Here are all my plastrons. Here's a here's a series from young ones to old ones, can the computer learn to recognize them? With the hope that they would make a nice little program I could put on my phone, and I could scan my turtle and bingo, I would have who it is. But it didn't happen. They published on it. They actually managed to figure out how to do it, but nothing that I could use. So anyway, they got a nice project out of it. And what they got was not the intricacies of a pattern, but they used the outline of the entire pattern that the computer could learn to do. And my data has been combined with another group down in Portland, which is kind of interesting because Portland's the southern limit of the range, and we're near the northern part of the range limit. And trying to publish this paper, looking at how well this technique works, so that the babies and the adult are recognizable all the way through adulthood, and they certainly are. So learning about the turtles involves getting data, and what I gather from this, I'm trying to say here that if you can capture them over and over again, then you get good data. And you can see with R1, if you look at her plastron length, it just doesn't change all the way through 22, which is when I last caught her. And her weight is also, pretty close. It goes up and down. After brumation, they come out of brumation basically with the same weight they went in, and then they lose it for a while because the water's too cold when they come out and they can't feed yet. So they lose a little bit of weight and then gain it back again, and usually it's quite consistent. So there's 221 individuals that I know because I've caught them at least twice, and sometimes a lot more than that. So where do they live? Well, they got to live in the right place to avoid predation, have access to food and mates. So this is a picture, a satellite image of the lake. It's about 5 kilometers long. I'm gonna live there. There's other bodies of water around. In initial studies, I was monitoring 15. I can't do it by myself. There's too many around here. And so looking at a number of them from different ponds and seeing where they live. So as I mentioned earlier, they'll hang out anywhere from pristine little ponds to really ugly, muddy, mucky waters. In 2009, I was lucky enough to get a grant, and so I could hire some students and people to work with me. And we put on transmitters, kind of screw them onto the plastron, and let them go. And then you can trace where they are. And what we found is that some of them really move. So I'll try to interpret a bit here. This turtle was caught not far from my cabin in the area I mentioned earlier, called Southwest. And the turtle traveled. It traveled to a little pond here, and then traveled down to a larger pond way down the hill on the Wolf Ranch. So we're transitioning actually from interior Douglas fir zone into a ponderosa pine grassland zone, but this is agricultural down here. It's a cattle ranch. So that's a journey of a couple of kilometers. What I don't know is what the route they took. I have a feeling they've got a map of the area and know exactly where to go. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they're pretty much beelined between bodies of water. I don't know how they do it. I'm pretty sure they do. Here's another one, first caught in Nan's Pond, which is here. And it traveled down to Bull Pond and back again. And this is right down near the Thompson River on the Wolf Ranch. So they move. And the literature indicates that they can move even further than the kilometers you see here at the bottom, which I got from the literature. So they must know what they're doing to do all that. But in May of 2009, we caught L1 here, close to our cabin, and it disappeared. We couldn't find it anywhere. Lita, an assistant who's an expert at tracking, tracking. She studied rattlesnakes, did her master's on that. And she went all over the place, including way down closer to Chase, trying to find this turtle. Just could not find it for a long time. Now, tracking with a radio system, you have to have line of sight. So it could have been that the turtle wasn't far away and just somehow got blocked, but I don't know. What happened is that on the 16th of July, I was standing on my deck with the receiver, and I got a really faint signal. And it got stronger and stronger and stronger. And the turtle came back. That's the machine I borrowed. And by the 17th of June of the next year, she was still here. She swam all the way back. I tracked it all the way back to where we initially caught her. And there she was. So they move for whatever reasons, they move. So why move? Mostly their movements have to do with the behavioral thermoregulation I mentioned before. They want to get to the right temperature so that it can work optimally. So they even migrate back and forth across the lake to get out of the shade and into the sun, right in front of them, where we are at the south end of the lake. So they'll also move for mates. The males will gather for the females. They move to find the optimal foraging grounds, the optimal nesting area. Maybe aggression plays a part of it. Maybe they respond to predators. Though I'm not sure. In White Lake, which is near Salmon Arm, there's really good evidence that otters are hunting the turtles because they find the carapaces on top of the ice in the wintertime. But you see here in this picture, an otter notices me, not paying any attention to the turtle. And when the otter kind of moved around, it knocked the turtle off the log with its tail. So I saw no indication that otters predate on turtles in Niskonlith Lake anyway, but the otters aren't a regular feature there, though some other animals are. I just got a video clip from the surveillance camera of a neighbor yesterday showing a cougar in his yard, 2 doors away from me. Disturbances might make them move. Habitat disruption would make them move. And there's been major disturbances. The rancher at the time wasn't taking good care of these cattle, and they ended up in the lake, all over where the turtles are. Didn't seem to bother them at all. So why do you move? I mean, most animals avoid moving. They kind of hang out, and they move when they have to get things. So maybe you have some ideas, just thinking about why you move, and there may be more reasons they move. I don't know. So 2025, this year was highly unusual. What you're seeing here is a picture of the southeast corner of the lake, a couple hundred meters from my cabin. And there's 72 turtles on these logs. And that's weird. And this is the scenario here. This is a pond just across the road and down the hill. And it's a beautiful little pond. It's a really rich place. And normally it'll look like this come melt time or just after melt time. I don't understand the hydrology here. It regularly does drain every season somehow, and very suddenly it gets very sparse, but not like happened this last year. It just went to nothing. And normally I would be seeing maybe 60 turtles in this area. I've got a lot of them. And they do move, some of them move regularly between water bodies because early in the season, given that they'd like to be warmer, the smaller bodies of water warm up faster than the lake. So a lot of them go back and forth there. But here, there were basically none left. And so where did they come up? Well, they came into the lake. And not only did those ponds dry up, other ponds dried up too. So we got a whole bunch of more turtles here. I've been in the habit of making a count early in the season before the babies are out, and you probably miss a lot of small ones that are already there. So there's basically an adult and just sub-adult count. And normally, when I make that navigation of the lake, I get about 100 turtles. This year, I got more than 300. So it's pretty clear what's happened. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens if the water comes back to these ponds and how that affects the counts. And I also don't know what the effect of having so many turtles together here is. Are they going to compete more for the resources, or there are abundant resources and it doesn't matter? There's lots of questions you can ask about this, and future numbers might help to answer that. What I do know is this last year, there are just tons of babies. Excuse me. So, trying to figure these things out. Motivation for the study was largely about conservation and best practices for managing turtle populations, because they are endangered in the coast. And my question has been, how does studying this healthy population, and what can we learn that might help the recovery efforts on the coast? So here's kind of a little quick summary of some of the things that have happened in the last 2 decades. I think I was young when I started. Got a lot of pictures of turtles, and I cataloged them all. I'm going to keep them from year to year, comparing them, take data on them. That's wrong. I told you 221 earlier. They move between water bodies. And again, I'm just sampling. I don't know how many do and how many don't. I mean, ideally, they'd all have little implants that a satellite would pick up and tell me I could sit here in my easy chair and just see what they're all doing all the time. But somehow they're not grizzly bears. They don't warrant the investment in research money. So even though they're of special concern, don't tell too many people to take them off that list, but they're doing very nicely. And the way you can tell if a population is doing nicely is not the absolute numbers, but the structure, the demographic profile. How many babies, how many, smaller guys, you got all sizes. So there's an up and coming cohort to replace those that are older. The first time I did some comparisons between 2009 and a couple of years ago of some of the major water bodies where I've studied them, and the population basically doubled during that time, and the counts, I could say, from the 200s up into the 400s. So now our wisdom comes to play. What do we do to protect these animals? People like turtles and they want to protect them. So they put up signs so that they won't be squashed. Turtles on roads don't mix very well because they do try to get to the other side, and they get to the other side to go to and from to water bodies to do their nesting. And so, they're hard to see when you're driving. So people at the campsite know to, there's signs are posted, and they sometimes I get calls, usually about one a year, of when people see turtles, and they let me know about them. The park that's in the north west corner of the lake is doing some renovation work. So this year the biologists got in touch with me. They're in the area supervisor, and they really like turtles, so they were excited to study them too. So that was nice. I'm going to go back here, and whoops, sorry. They found some on the boat launch ramp where they would be squished. So they dug them up and brought them to the wildlife park, the UBC Wildlife Park near Kamloops, and they hatched, and then they put them back. 9 turtles. We'll see if we can get those guys again and get them. and also protected another nest that they found. Yeah, there's a project going in White Lake a few years ago. And here the community is totally involved because they've got a road and the turtles cross the road and then they nest in people's driveways and stuff. They're all over the place. So the whole community got together, the kids from the school, and they had a little project going too, tracking the turtles there. And other places too have set up areas that induce the turtles to come to lay their eggs, like this sandy strip here. I think that's New Rebel stuff. So it goes on. Here you see a diagram showing the area we're in and the limits of the population here. This is kind of interesting. There's a lot of people studying them around here, and there's a recovery program here. But they estimate there's fewer than 250 adults in this population. And as you saw earlier, there's more than that right in front of me in this one lake in the interior. They are different. They're genetically different too. They're still the same species, but there's different genetics. So people are working on it. And of course, we can help by letting people know about these things. So not uncommonly have a group of students and young people groups and even older people groups. And we go and hear about the turtles and look at the turtles and see what they're doing. So the studies I'm doing are about population structure, the patterning that we can help to determine the individual's path through life, looking at temperature as a resource. We had a student do a little project there from Thompson Rivers University. I've been taking temperatures of logs and seeing how that fits with the selection of the turtles of where they are. It's hard to find nest sites. You can find them in the terrain where I'm studying, mostly by failed nests because there's holes. If they hit a rock or something, they pull out and leave a hole. They don't cover it back up because they weren't successful. But getting more precise information on nesting sites and when they happen. I still have questions about some of the hatchlings perhaps emerging earlier. I was really shocked when a colleague in Portland said the young spend the first season in the forest, though. That's not the case here. My initial project was to see if cattle were actually disrupting their nesting by trampling the areas, because cattle, all of this stuff, provide a really nice nesting area for them, but then the cattle could just smash everything. So I had a couple areas set up, but the next year when I went to study that, it turned out that the cattle were excluded where I found these nest sites. So couldn't really determine that, but there's no good indication that the cattle are adversely affecting the populations. So trying to avoid problems with roads. Road morts in our area are minimal, maybe one a year, but other areas it's been pretty bad, where they'll lose a fraction of their populations crossing busy highways. And getting people involved, getting buy-in from the people in agriculture and campers and so on, and getting people tuned into wetlands and how important they are. So a lot of people helped out with that and provided money and support. And just a little thought now, wisdom into the future, turtles and us. Animals have evolved the ability to predict their environment. They have to. They have to know where to go, what to do, where. If the environment changes too rapidly, they may get a curveball thrown at them. Can they keep up? Now, they've kept up with changing environments over eons, but the rate of change now is so great, and our role in changing the environment is huge. Can they keep up? I don't know with the changes. For instance, those nests, if things heat up too much, how much of the nest is going to be below 28 degrees? Are we going to lose males? Can they make an adjustment? Will they dig deeper nests? I mean, can they? I don't know. I'm not sure what will happen there. Anyway, that's. Well, I think that must mean I'm finished. So I'm hoping you have questions for me.
I do have a question. Can you hear me?
I can, Anita.
Yeah. I'm intrigued by the coloration of the plastrons. What purpose would that serve? They're beautiful.
I wish I could the answer. I basically, the field I've studied and I'm interested in still is behavioral ecology. And my project that I did, beginning with being a senior in university and then doing my master's, was I had my questions on the function of coloration in communication and the adaptive, what's called adaptive significance of color patterns, like the plastrons of these turtles. And I was studying guppies, which have wild guppies, which have very different color patterns, and trying to figure out what those patterns mean and for them too. It's really hard to figure out. One of the answers I got an incredible answer once from one of the most famous students of genetics and evolution, Theodosius Dobzhansky. When I was a grad student, he visited my lab, and I asked him, figuring here's this guru of understanding the evolution of animals, and I said, what do they mean? What do these patterns mean in these guppies? And he said, pleiotropy. What pleiotropy means is that a particular gene can have side effects, that they may not be directly adaptive. So having a color pattern may be just an offshoot, an accident of a biochemical pathway producing the colors when the biochemical pathway is producing another kind of a protein with a function for survival. That, in other words, it's kind of accidental, and it may mean nothing, which is not very satisfying at all. So my simple answer is, I don't know. So they're very entertaining, because when I find a turtle and I don't have it marked, I have to go through all these pictures and play, match the pattern. So it's nice to do, but it beats me, since as far as I can tell, they're not paying attention to it when they're mating. They're face to face, they're not underneath. What's underneath looking up? Nothing. Don't know. So if you have any ideas, shoot them to me.
The only idea I can think of is that they're beautiful and they appeal to humans, so humans want to preserve them.
They've had these patterns for probably 15 million years, well before we got in the picture.
Oh yeah, that's quite true, Peter. They did better than the dinosaurs at survival, didn't they?
No, the dinosaurs are still with us. They're called birds.
Oh, yeah, well, I know that. But I meant,
the other point of
what
these
I was thinking of.
The males are no prettier than the females with the pattern, so it's not the kind of thing you'd see with like birds, where the one sex has a prettier plumage than the other usually, or often.
Have you noticed a change in the water temperature over the last 20 years?
I can't say that I have. The thing is, of doing most of my studies on a big lake, you get a warming in the summertime on the surface, but down below it's still cold, and if you get a good wind, it mixes it and cools it off. So it's really hard to tell. So I haven't done the appropriate I've taken the temperature all the way through on the surface, and I haven't really noticed much there. It may change, may be different overall, maybe slowly warming, but I kind of don't think so. It's pretty deep, so it's got a big reservoir of cold on it. The smaller ponds, of course, can heat up more in the case of the drought or the water level drops. Of course, it
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, I hadn't realized that with our Western painted turtles that the temperature can alter the sex of the hatchlings.
Yeah, it's
And
interesting. And sometimes I wonder about it because I've got some records of some turtles where I I thought they were males and then they were females, and I'm just wondering if they actually can do sex changes later. I don't know that for sure, or if it's just my error. Um, a male's pretty easy to tell actually once you get used to it, because it's more than just the long claws and the big fat thick tail. They have thicker head necks. They're kind of more articulated pattern usually on their carapace. They kind of have a little more of a waist usually. So, but when they're small, just getting about yay big, usually you can't determine until they're about 100 millimeters or so long. Sometimes males become obvious before that, earlier on, and the females later. But when they become males, then it becomes pretty obvious. But sometimes it isn't so obvious.
yeah.
You mentioned that they freeze in the winter. Is it true freezing, or are they in a deep torpor? Or
Yeah, it is true freezing, but they can only take it for so long and for so cold, apparently. If it gets too cold for too long, it'll kill them. But and I don't have any monitoring of inside nests to know those answers on survival. It's interesting, in the nest, you wouldn't believe. I mean, if when they first lay, the nests are vulnerable to predation, and if the scent is there, they'll get dug up by predators and eaten. But also, this sounds really crazy. They get predated upon by plants, because oftentimes a good place to nest is right on the roadside. And what's there? Weeds. And the weeds grow, and their roots entangle and ensnare the eggs and hatchlings. So that's been documented.
Wow.
it's interesting.
Can't hear you, Vicky. You talking?
And I just said that is interesting, entangling the nest like that. I would never have thought of that.
I always thought killer weeds were something else.
Thank you. Sure, it's fascinating discussion. Thank you.
Was. Let's see, Shanti has made a comment there too.
Oh, sorry, I don't see the chat. So
So I'm just trying to find Shanti. She's just saying, thank you, Peter. I learned a lot. Thank you for your dedication to this species.
you're welcome. Well, it's kind of fun, you get out there in your kayak and you're on the hunt. And I don't think I'm as good at it as I used to be, but I use a dip net, and more often my hands. It just depends on where I am and what. And sometimes I'm athletic enough to get two at once, but usually not. And I have a lot of misses. They're extremely rare. It's interesting. Some turtles in some areas get quite adapted to people and don't seem to mind them around. But these guys, boy, they always spot you before you spot them. They think eagle eyes.
Well, we all grew up with painted turtles in our terrariums somewhere.
Did you, or did you have red-eared sliders?
Oh, you used to be able to buy them in the stores.
Painted turtles? Really?
Hundreds of them. Oh, yeah. And
yeah. I didn't know that.
Every kid had painted turtles.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I grew up somewhere else, and they were all red-eared slider. I remember I had one when I was very young, and at some point it became a lump under the carpet.
What were the ones, Peter, that I had as a kid, and it wasn't the red-eared slider, it was a brownish colored turtle.
Oh,
It was a pet, but it was brown. It wasn't.
yeah, there's another turtle that people say doesn't live here. It's called the Western Pond turtle. My friend Don Kramer, who's a PhD zoologist, was up on the Sunshine Coast at Ruby Lake, and he sent me a picture of a turtle he thought was different. And to me, it looked like a Western Pond turtle. Now, did someone just, the thing is with turtles, people can catch them and release them somewhere. So there's some there. And certainly I had one as a pet that I got in California and kept for a while. And it, so it could have been a Western Pond turtle.
I mean, I bought it in the pet store. They were selling them in the pet store at that time. Mind you, we're talking probably 70 years ago. So God knows what they weren't selling in those. And I wound up boiling it to death. I put it out in the sun in its bowl, and I forgot that it was out there in this blazing sun, and I cooked it. I mean, it was floating in the water when I went to get it. Oh my God, I was so upset about that. I can still remember the angst. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, that was very, very interesting. Thank you very much, Peter.
You're welcome.
Right.
I hope there's more questions.
Oh, aren't there other species where the sex of the offspring are determined by the temperature of the nest? Like, aren't alligators like that?
I think you're right, but I'm not sure I remember. There's a lot of really odd things. I mean, we're in this thing of the way we do it and the way a lot of the animals we know do it. But there's a lot of fish that are very interesting sex stories. One of my favorite is the clown anemone fish, the Nemo job.
Oh, yeah.
A pair nested in an anemone. The female's the larger one, and all the eggs she lays hatch into males. And the males fight it out to see who can be a female. So the dominant male becomes a female.
oh,
If you have a male and female on the anemone and you remove the female, that male will turn into a female. And if you bring her back, he'll turn back into a male. And that's all using the same body parts and hormones that we have. It's all common stuff.
Yeah.
After all, we are fish, but so there's a lot of tweaks on how to get that done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right with the alligators and crocodiles, Val.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be the depth in the nest that determines the temperature. Obviously, warmer on the top.
Yeah.
It doesn't. But I mean, in the case of alligators and crocodiles, they have incredible parental care.
Yeah.
Turtles have none, that I know at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're gone. They don't stay around the nest because they don't live there. The nest's on land, and they live in the water. If you leave these guys out too long without access to water, they'll dry up.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions out there?
very interesting.
Thank you very much,